Hi everyone. So today what we're going to be doing is going to just give a little recap of group buys with then some illustrations up on the board here. So I'm going to be switching back and forth between the screen share associated with my R console and then also then showing me operating on the board, which you can see right up here. So to start, we're going to be working with our bikes data, and I just want to go back over sort of an overview of how to actually do group buys again, and then sort of illustrate visually on a board sort of what's happening under the hood of R. So as per usual, we bring our bikes data in, and so I'll share the script with you as well, so you guys can go ahead and work through this alongside me. But so we imported our bikes data. It's again a big data file, so I already imported it. And so as always, we can sort of see there's start time, end time, all the things we've been working with before. We can see some things are being imported as characters. So, we got to convert things to date times and all that. What I then have right here is basically one big long set of pipes that will go ahead and create our date time. So for example, start time equals, we're going to do another mutate, end time equals, so these convert to date times. Right here, then we calculate our trip time from that. We then convert our trip time to numeric. We then filter it, because remember how there was all those extreme trip times. Then now that we have trip time and we know the distance, we can calculate the speed in miles per hour. And then we also create our route. We create our rider age. We filter rider age, again, leaving in our NAs. And then finally, we add that one column. So the nice part is that you can loop all these things together in one single line of code. And so if we look at a glimpse right now of bikes before we run this, we just see that sort of there's all these columns right here that we imported, and here they are right here. We can go ahead and then just run this in one big chunk. It'll take a quick second to do that. But now if we look at bikes again, all those features that we've been creating along the way are now added in there. So we have our route now, we have our speed, our rider age, our trip time, and then our one value. And so this is a really nice way to do it because again, when you're thinking about this sort of idea of being able to reproduce your data and showing exactly what happens from the original, this is very clear in terms of what exactly we did, how we created these features. And if you want to modify something, you just go and do it right here quick. But just remember again, we're mutating, and our pipe just means then verbally. So mutate, create this, then mutate, create end time, then so on and so forth. For this, so just to keep it simple, we're going to just select out just a few data frame or just a few columns from our data frame. So we're going to go ahead and run this bikes, and we're going to select just trip time, user type, tourist, and that one. And so you can see now we have just those 4 columns. And so I have sort of a mock version of this just up here on the board. So hopefully you can see this all pretty well. And so what you can see here is we have our trip time, we have our user type. And so then this is broken down into if they're customers or if they're subscribers. We then have if they're a tourist or not. And then finally that one column, which is just a bunch of numeric one values. So the first thing is let's do our group by. And what I want to do is I just want to group by user type and count how many observations there are in our data frame of customers versus subscribers. Remember, subscribers are the ones that have a long-term yearly subscription. And so without even assigning this to a data frame, we can just go ahead and call bikes. And then we want to group by the user type. So group underscore by, and then user type. And then remember, we need to summarize something, right? If you just group by user type, it's not going to actually do anything because you aren't telling it what to do with those groupings. So what we got to do is summarize. And then I want to just count the number of ones. And so what we'll do is we can create our column name, what the new column name is going to be. So we'll just call it number. And then it equals the sum of then the column 1. And we can go ahead and run that. And so you can see here that we have 2 then groupings, right? There's only 2 levels in our data frame for user type. There's subscribers and customers. So what it does is it splits off everyone that's a customer and counts the number of ones, and splits off everyone that's a subscriber and counts the number of ones. So if we come here to the board, what this is doing is it's breaking up our data frame essentially into 2 different chunks. So the first one, it's going to go and it's going to take, let me get a different color marker. And it's going to take the customers first. So customer, 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 and customer. So it's going to go here because these are all of our customer columns. And then since we're summing something, it's going to sum the column that we give it. So in this case, we just tell it sum up the number of values in the column 1. So it's going to do 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 and then plus 1. So in this case, if we did a group by on just this simple data frame, for our customer value here, the groupings of customer, we would have just 5. So after it does that, then it's going to go ahead and jump over to the other level that's in that factor of user type, which is subscriber. And so in this case, it's going to go and do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. So then we would have a subscriber number of 4. And so that's like the fundamental of group bys, okay? And so there's 2 more levels to this. You can group by multiple different factor levels, like you can string them together, which I'm going to show you. And then of course you can summarize by more than just counting the number of things. And so this is one of these things that we're going to be doing time and time again, which is why I kind of wanted to make this video. So let's go back here to our script. And what I want to do is, so we just counted the number of observations. I want to show you again how to add on an additional layer. So what I want to do is not only summarize the number of observations, but summarize the average distance traveled. And so all we do here, so we can go ahead and we'll copy this and just sort of leave this in place. And then, so now what we want to do is summarize both the number of observations, so the number of rides, number of ops, and mean distance traveled, or mean trip time, just to keep it. So all we can do here, so we have our summarize. So here's just one thing, and we can just make another column. Remember, you can just separate these simply by a comma. So we have number equals the sum of 1. And then all we need is if we want the mean trip time, well, we create our column name. So mean trip time. And what is it equal to? And so here we can just use our regular old mean function of trip time. That's it. Remember though, if there's NA values, you need to tell R how to deal with those. And so in this case, we're going to stick with NA RM equals true. So this way it knows to calculate the mean around those NAs and it won't give you an error. Okay, so all this did is this did the exact same things before. You can see that when we just counted up the numbers, this is still right here for different user types. But it added an additional layer of calculating up the mean trip time across all the customers, and then it calculated the mean trip time for all the subscribers. So if we kind of go back here to our board, if we wanted to calculate first the mean trip time for customers, it's going to count 10 plus 6 plus go down to the next customer plus 12 plus 4 and then finally plus 6. And so this is 10, 20, 32, 38. So that's the total trip time summed up across all the customers. And then of course it's a mean, so we got to divide it by the number of observations, divided by 5. Okay, so whatever that is. So that now gives us our mean trip time for the customer value right here. And what it does then, so after it's calculated for all the customers, then it's going to go through and calculate it for the subscribers. Okay. And so again, this is a pretty straightforward thing. We can add another layer on. Let's say we want to know the minimum time, min trip time, or well, let's do max. That's probably a little more interesting. Trip time. We can use, again, our base R function of max trip time. na.rm equals true, and run it. Close it. I think I'm probably missing a parenthesis, so there we go. And so here we go. So customers have a mean trip time of 244. So subscribers, even though we filtered it out after 240, not a single subscriber went longer than 226, right? So there's a lot of customers that are taking these really long trip times. They're probably actually forgetting their bikes places, where subscribers know to put those things back because they get charged if they go over certain amounts of time. So this is, again, the basics to sort of these group buys, but sort of what starts making these more powerful is here we just segmented it simply by 2 different levels, if they're a customer or if they're a subscriber. What we can do is an additional layer and start, instead of asking just by user type, what if we want to look at sort of both if they're a user type and if they're coming from a tourist site. So here what we would do, group by user type and tourist, if they're going to a tourist site. So this operates the same way in our typical tidyverse fashion. We call bikes, then we want to group by. And in this case, we're going to do user type, but we're going to add on if they're coming from a tourist location. So this now is asking the question, okay, not only do user types differ, but do they differ when they're at a tourist site or not too? And so we'll talk about this once we get our answer. And so right now we're just going to look at, we're going to summarize, and let's just look at the number of rides, sum. Okay. And what do we see here? So you can see now there's 4 different levels or 4 different columns present in our data frame. So as before, we have customer and subscriber, but now there's 2 levels within customer. Are they grabbing bikes from a tourist site or not? And so this already starts telling us a lot more. So what we can see is that customers, remember, these are the people that are just casually grabbing a bike. If they're grabbing a bike from a tourist site, they grab a huge number of bikes. They're always being observed at these tourist sites. Customers, the people that are just going and throwing $3 in the machine and using it, are almost never, by comparison, grabbing bikes from tourist sites. The complete opposite is true, though, for subscribers. Subscribers here now, if they're not at a tourist site, that's where the vast majority of bike rides happen from. So subscribers are rarely grabbing bikes from these tourist sites. And this makes sense. They already live in Chicago. They don't need to go to those places. They're actually using them to commute to get around. So they're grabbing them from a lot of different locations. On the other hand, subscribers, in terms of tourist sites, are grabbing much fewer, right? So they're only grabbing 23,000. It's like a third the number from tourist sites compared to non-tourist sites, where the complete opposite is true here for customers. And so this is, again, where this starts becoming really powerful, is that if you want to start segmenting up your user base, or, in this case, how bikes are being used and by who, this gives a lot of information. So if you want to sort of start targeting a certain customer at a certain time, right, you want to encourage customers to use bikes not only just at the tourist sites, but also to get around Chicago in general. Well, you can maybe provide a marketing campaign to get them to grab it just from sort of a random street too. Similarly, you might be able to, say if they're subscribers, you might be able to offer, like free rides or discounts or something if they're not, or to get them to go start using tourist sites too. So let's just kind of take a step, and I'll show you again the video about sort of how this is working. So if we erase this here, so again, there's 2 levels present here. And so how this will be working on here is, first it's going to ask segment, is it a customer or not? And then it's going to go customer, yes, for example. So, or tourist, yes. So first what it's going to do here is, if you look, we have customer, yes, and it's a tourist. So we're going to count 1. Customer, is it a tourist? Yes. So we're going to count 1. And we keep going until it sees, okay, another customer? No, it's not. So we're not going to count this 1. Customer? No, it's not. So we're not going to count this 1. Customer? No, it's not. So we're not going to count it. So you can see that sort of for cust in our data frame here and tourist, this would equal to 2. So now let's go ahead and do customer and not tourist. So customer, we already know these 2 are yes, so we're not going to count the 1. But we do have 1 here, so customer, not a tourist, 1, customer, not a tourist, 1, and 1 more here. So this gives us a grand total of 3. So R, under the hood, has already gone through and done that set of logic. Is it this? Is it this? And if it is, go ahead and calculate. Use the number associated with that column. In this case, 1. That's what we're summarizing. Next, we're going to go ahead and do our subscribers. So let's do subscribers and tour. And what do we see here? So subscribers, so first subscriber, no, it's not a tourist, so we ignore it. Second subscriber, it is a tourist. So we're going to do 1. Subscriber is a tourist. 1 subscriber, not a tourist. So we have a grand total of 2 observations for subscribers that are also grabbing bikes from tourist sites. And so now our final one is subscribers, not tourists. And so you guys can imagine what's going to happen. It's going to go through, it's going to look, subscriber, yes, it is a tourist. So that's a 1. Or I'm sorry, not tourist. So subscriber, no, it's not a tourist. That's a 1. Subscriber, no, it's not a tourist. That's a 1. And so we have a grand total of 2. And so R automatically goes and does this over our whole data frame of hundreds of thousands of rows. But so that's kind of all I wanted to show you today, is just with this quick lesson, is that's how this is working. It's sort of this like logical flow of group buys. You ask, hey, what's one factor level? And depending on how many levels there, it'll go through and count for each level. And you can then further segment within those levels. In a way, you could imagine it just creating different data frames for each level that you're interested in and calculating directly on those. So that's all I have for today. This is just a quick thing. Please let me know either in class or with an email if this is useful and a useful supplement to your work. And thanks for taking the time to watch this.